All right, we will go ahead and get started. I apologize for my absence the last 2 weeks. I lost a close family member, and then I went on a family vacation, believe it or not. I have a kiddo who's getting ready to go to college, so I wanted to make sure not to miss that. So this work is very important to me, and please know that those decisions were not made lightly, but I'm very glad to be back this week. And thank you for your continued commitment and hard work. I am going to turn things over before we begin today to the task force chair, Courtney Washburn. She's going to talk a little bit about the neighborhood engagement plan.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for being here. I wanted to give a couple updates. First, I wanted to say we have heard the task force desire to get a better understanding of the neighborhood concerns from the neighborhood leaders. So we're doing a workshop with that group this week and hope to have a presentation at the next task force meeting. I'm also giving an update to City Council tomorrow about the task force, so what we have covered and what we intend to cover over the next several weeks. And then before Interfaith Sanctuary starts with their presentation, I just wanted to set some context. Sorry, I'm having a mass talking point microphone situation. We, the city, partner with Interfaith Sanctuary by serving on our Path Homes Executive Committee in a larger strategic conversation about ending homelessness. And then also, I want to be really clear, because we're often asked the questions what the city's relationship is with Interfaith and why the two seem to be connected. And that's largely because Interfaith Sanctuary is the only low barrier, housing first oriented, non-religiously affiliated emergency shelter in our homeless response system. And the city relies on the sanctuary for ensuring we're capable of meeting the needs on a night by night basis by serving all household types. We also have partnered with Interfaith Sanctuary on the operation of daytime cooling and warming shelters in regards to extreme weather events. And then also the city's emergency response to the COVID-19 pandemic for the population experiencing homelessness. And finally, for this presentation, I've asked Interfaith Sanctuary not to address the potential location of the shelter, but to focus on the business model scope and the residents, I think you guests of the sanctuary, to get a better understanding of the shelter's business plans and operations. We'll address the siting issues later in our task force meetings. And so with that, I think I'm handing it over to Andy. Oh, sure. Sorry, Andy.
Apologies. Okay, I just have a couple of housekeeping announcements, and then I promise we'll turn it over to Andy. So I think last week we neglected to introduce Reverend Andrew Kukla, who's one of our faith leader representatives from First Presbyterian Church. Thank you for being here and welcome. And then we have a couple of folks out this week, as we often do in the summer. Penny Beach is out, and Dr. Emily Jack is subbing in. Emily, thank you for being here. Dr. Jack. Charity Nelson is out and is traveling. Serena Hinojosa is also traveling. She had planned to join us online. I'm not sure if she's there yet, but in any case, welcome to her and to our other online task force members. Just a quick reminder to build on what Courtney said. This week, as there have been every week the last few weeks, there is another 30-minute feasibility criteria workshop. All of you are going to get this list of the frequently asked questions with answers at the end of the meeting today. Do you remember putting Post-its along the feasibility criteria with your questions? The staff at the city have been working really hard in collaboration with Interfaith and others to get you informed answers to those questions. So you'll get that today. If you can stay after for the workshop, please do. Okay, and as Courtney said, today we're going to be hearing primarily from Interfaith Sanctuary, who is the low barrier shelter partner with the city of Boise on shelter operations. So now I'm going to turn things over to Andy Scoggin, who is the president of the board of Interfaith. Thank you.
Good, not a problem with me. So thank you. Thanks for the time today. And I really speak on behalf not only of myself as the president of the board of directors of the Interfaith Sanctuary, but also on behalf of all of my fellow board members. And we've been working for some time with our staff, with our executive director, and with others on looking at where Interfaith Sanctuary is going to go, because we knew really for a few years now that we were changing, growing, evolving, and strengthening the model that Interfaith provides in a way that clearly outgrew the initial location that Interfaith Sanctuary had started in. Now, some of you may know that Interfaith Sanctuary actually started the term Interfaith Sanctuary by moving nightly from church to church to church throughout the valley many years ago. And then they acquired an old warehouse, which is down on Cooper Court. You've seen some pictures of it, and through some very generous contributions from the construction community, from neighbors and individuals within the city and others, we're able to create a dorm type setting, later added a small family side to that shelter. And we're able to sleep 164 beds when we weren't involved in a pandemic, so in under normal setting. And we're able to begin to create some other sorts of programming within that facility as well. And so Interfaith Sanctuary really began as a place to get out of the rain and the cold at night, and then and the heat, and get back onto the street first thing in the morning. It was, you know, almost a warehousing situation for those who didn't have any place else to go. And that was not where we wanted to end up. We wanted to end up providing the type of support, services, care, compassion, and change that would allow our guests to be able to, on their own 2 feet, re-enter a housing situation of their own, employment situation of their own, take care of their families, take care of those around them, provide for others, be a good community member, be a good friend, be a good neighbor. And to do that, we're going to have to do more than just have some beds at night and then send people back out onto the streets in the morning. So over the years, the last several years, you're going to hear presentations, I won't go through them, that will speak to a number of these critical programs that are changing people's lives in our city. I do want to note that we don't see a lot of people on our streets every day in this city who have no place else to go, like exists, and we read about in the newspapers over and over and over again. This task force has been very well acquainted with some of those challenges, and we don't for a number of reasons, but critical to that is a group of organizations in our city who work incredibly hard behind the scenes, Interfaith Sanctuary being part of that group, to make sure that people have some place to go and be taken care of. And it's not a perfect system yet, but it's getting better, and it has gotten better. And I've watched it over the last decade become better. And what we know from what we've developed and grown over the last 5 or 6 years in particular is that in order for us to do what we need to do, we've outgrown the place we're at, but we know what the new place will need to be. And we respect the right of a city and its citizens and its community to make decisions such as, you know, where and how we're going to deal with our most vulnerable people, many of them being the homeless. And this task force is an example of working through that, and decisions will be made. But I need to be incredibly clear as the president of the board and speaking on behalf of the board, and having met, long before this became the case with our senior management, executive director, and others, need to be clear to say that we'll describe what we need. where it is, we need to decide if this city and this group and others in the city council are willing to be able to allow this organization to have a space that allows for the programming, the housing, the strengthening, the support, et cetera, that we believe is our mission and need to be done. And if we can't do that, find that space, then we understand, and we've made some very hard decisions, that we would, Interfaith Sanctuary would cease to exist, and the city and or other organizations would step in and take with whatever the new space is spaces that are provided, that they would be able to have to take on that role. We don't want to. I mean, that would be the worst thing for us possible, is if we weren't able to drive forward our mission, grow it, and be even more successful at the support that we want to provide to our neighbors and our friends. But if we can't do it in the way that we need to do it, then it would be, I come from the grocery world. And so if you came to a city who said, we want groceries, but we want to put your meat department, you can build a building over here. And this is, I know there's a scattered site idea. We can't work within that situation, and same in grocery, and put department for produce about 8 miles away. And then we'll put your freezer in another part of the city, and you'll haul stuff back around all day long. And then we'll put another building over in the warehouse district, because people don't really want to see, people driving back and forth and parking in their neighborhood. So we'll move you to a place where nobody has to really see you. We would never enter that city and bring groceries, in my former life, working grocery. In the same way here, if we aren't able to take care of people in a way that is more harmful instead of less harmful, by spreading and disconnecting the programs and the facilities and the abilities for them to connect within their city. So even if it's in a single site, if it's not in a place where it connects into all of the things that need to be done in the city, we can't operate. And it would be like trying to, saying, here, I'll give you a car, but I'll only give you 2 wheels. We wouldn't be able to drive that car. And then someone would say, well, at least you have 2 wheels. And we'd say that's more dangerous than no wheels, because now you're very dangerously driving down the road and crashing. We need to have the right place and the right space and the right facilities around us and the right ability to perform this. We believe that this task force is committed to that. We believe we're going to get there. We're very optimistic about all of this, but we need to make it really clear that if it doesn't come about in a way that works, and I think a lot of what's been put on the walls helps to really clearly articulate where we need to go and what we need to do, then there will be someone hopefully that would arise that would be able to work in whatever setting or space or spaces or other type of organization that this task force and the city council would decide on. So our hope is, our dearest desire is, that we all come together in this and end up with a really good solution that provides for what you're going to hear today from these incredibly dedicated people that do work that most of us would have a hard time doing day in and day out, and the people that work with them that are there all night long and all day long, working through the night when I'm asleep in my bed. They're working, they're taking care of things. They are an amazing, amazing group. I'm glad you're going to get to know a few of them. Wish you could know all of them. I'll finish with this. The people that are in our shelters, we do call them guests, that are in our shelter today are shelters because we have some pandemic extra shelter that's not ideal, but is what we're having to do because of the spread out. These are people who are so much like you and me. And we've seen a few, I saw some more communications this week about people being concerned that there's a great group of people that are addicts or alcoholics and that would harm a neighborhood they're in. And there, in my family, and probably in yours, there are some people who have dealt with and are fighting with addiction. In my neighborhood and yours, that's no different. And it's the same with our guests, but it's not what they are, and it's not who they are. And it's, a small group like in any other area of people that are fighting to get better control of who they are and become better citizens. But they are moms and their dads, brothers and sisters, they're musicians and artists, they're people who worked in many different settings, but because of things that have happened to them in their lives, some they've chosen, some they haven't. They don't have a house right now. They don't have a home, but they're really great people caring people, give you the shirt off their back, do with me whatever they can to help somebody. They take care of each other, and we're grateful to be able to work with them. And I'm grateful to be able to tell you a little about them. And I'm thankful now that we're going to hear from some really good people. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andy. All right, we are going to turn things over to the Executive Director of Interfaith Sanctuary, Jody Peterson Steigers.
Thank you. And I first want to thank you all for making this time and dedicating your time to learning more about kind of what homelessness looks like in our community. And it's good to learn alongside each other. So thank you so much for being here. I'm waiting for my slides to come up. Hold on. Everyone take a deep breath. I've been practicing this for a while, so. It worked perfectly this morning. Isn't that the way it always is? So I'll just fill you with some information. The presentation today is going to do some historic telling, and my staff here is here to do some real storytelling about the guests that we actually serve. And I think what they speak about is the most important thing. It's amazing to listen to them. And the reason why we know the programming that we're supposed to do is because of the dedication of this staff. And they come and they meet with me and they tell me what they're seeing over and over again. And we then work together to try and solve it for one person, but then for everyone else that's going to fall into that same problem. So it's a team effort that has created who we are today. And it's a team effort that will get this slideshow up on screen. Should we do a little exercise while we're doing this? Jen, want to ask a question or something?
Why don't we go ahead, Casey, and hand out the FAQs? People can have a chance to read over those while we're waiting. I think it'll just be one more minute. And for those of you who are following along online, we will, of course, post these online. Once we get the summary of today's meeting up, we will post these as well. All right, thank you for your patience. It looks like we're ready to go.
Hi. Okay, so my name is Jody Peterson Steigers, and I am the Executive Director of Interfaith Sanctuary. And we're going to start today. Our first slide is just basically giving you a map of who we were. We were founded in 2005, and Andy did a great job of kind of talking about how an interfaith group responded to a need and created what is now Interfaith Sanctuary. And we were an overnight shelter. Our job was to make sure at night people had a place to lay down safely and a warm meal. But in the morning, everyone was asked to exit that building because of lack of staffing, and just that was how it was designed. And there's this book that has really spoken to me, and I think allowed us to kind of put words around how we want to serve. It's a book called Upstream by Dan Heath. And I'm going to read you kind of the paragraph that I feel launched us. You and a friend are having a picnic by the side of a river. Suddenly you hear a shout from the direction of the water. A child is drowning. Without thinking, you both dive in, grab the child, and swim to shore. Before you can recover, you hear another child cry for help. You and your friend jump back in the river to rescue her as well. Then another struggling child drifts into sight, and another and another. The two of you can barely keep up. Suddenly, you see your friend wading out of the water, seeming to leave you alone. Where are you going? You demand. Your friend answers, I'm going upstream to tackle the guy who's throwing all these kids in the water. And that's what it's like working in a homeless shelter. You see the real struggles as though people are drowning. They come to us and they have no ID. They have no way to connect to our community. But the ID is really hard to get when you've been in prison and you've lost all your documents. And so you can't just let them drown. You have to go to the place where they get the IDs, and you have to work in partnership with agencies so that they understand what's happening within their system, because they can't see it like we can, but they can fix us with us if they know. And so our job at Interfaith is to expose the gaps, but not sit in those gaps, fix them. And the way we figured out we could do that was we could bring solutions directly into our building. And so currently in our buildings, because we are buildings right now, we have what's called second chance programming. This programming was developed to meet the needs of the failures within our system right now. That doesn't mean it's always going to be a failure, but until we fix it, we need to be really good at it for the people that we serve. And the first program that we developed was called the Family Daytime Program, because watching our case managers try to connect families with the resources they so desperately needed, but they could only meet with them after 5 p.m. And that family had been on the street all day long, and they were exhausted, and their babies hadn't been napped, and they needed showers. There was no way to get traction for that work. And so we opened up our shelter 7 days a week to families with children. And we brought in early education, and we brought in parenting education, and we brought in a bank to teach finances. And we connected these families with all the things that they needed. And we connected them with Catch to get them on a housing list. And so suddenly, because they're there with us through the day, and we're able to follow their care and get them to doctor's appointments and look at employment, we were getting families out of our shelter in a much healthier way. After that, we had two of my case managers were kind of taking on employment specialties, like trying to get the guests who were saying, I want to go back to work. And they were filling out one application after another online, and we weren't getting any interviews. And even when we took them to go drop their resumes off, they weren't getting an opportunity to share their story, because there's a box you have to check when you've made a mistake. And even though you've spent your time in prison or you've done the work required, it's not forgotten on that piece of paper. And so the opportunity is not there for them. And so we thought, let's see if we can create a program in partnership with City of Boise that could connect our guests who want to work with a low barrier employment opportunity. And that would be working in our parks and keeping our city beautiful. And the City of Boise was very open to this idea. We identified the guests who wanted to go back to work, but maybe had some barriers even to start, maybe some mental health struggles. So we tied in a case manager. We provide transportation, we provided nutrition, and we got 6 people back to work with our first crew. And that crew did so well that the City of Boise said, let's do another crew. And then we started a second crew, got a second case manager, a second van to transport. And what happened when those people went back to work is that they felt useful again, and their mental health improved, and their hope came back. And some of them are still today working full-time for the City of Boise, but some of them launched to even different jobs because they found out that they could do it, and they had a job history again, and they had someone who could write a letter of recommendation. And that program is going into its 4th year, and the stats on that are pretty beautiful. The next program that we created was called Monday Meetup. This was for the guests who are stuck in the criminal court system. It's hard to imagine how they developed a program that would say, you're homeless with no income, but we're going to write you misdemeanors, and you're going to need to pay fines. You're going to need to go to a probation officer. You're going to need to do drug testing every day, but you have no income, you have no ID, and you have no job. So if you don't do any of those things, we're going to put you back in jail, where you're going to start this whole thing all over again. And so we decided to work with some judges, a public defender, the probation office, and said, hey, if we can support these people in our shelter, will you come to us and we'll get them to their court dates? We'll help them with their community service. We trained our staff to do the drug testing. We got Medicaid to cover the costs for that. We have a homeless judge now that sees our cases and are able to kind of reconcile things back to us to help support the guests and get them out of the criminal court system and back to work, back to housing, and back to life. The next program is Project Wellbeing. This was designed for guests who were struggling every day out on the street, not connecting with us or our services because their mental health issues had just not been addressed for so long. We invited them into our shelter. We identified 12 guests who we knew well. We knew that they had mental health issues, and we wanted to see what would happen if we created safety for them. If we allowed them to stay in our shelter all day long, and we would provide all of their necessities for them, but we would ask nothing in return. We would let them take naps. We would make sure they had 3 meals a day. We did dream boards. We watched emotionally inspiring movies. We took walks, and within 2 weeks, the reduction in their trauma created new people, people with hope who could do a dream board with us and tell us what their hopes and dreams were moving forward. And they got attached to case management. They wanted to get their IDs. They wanted to get on a housing list because suddenly they had a safe place to get better and look forward to something. And that led us to Project Recovery, which was, we had a lot of guests who were trying to find sobriety, and the way that the system worked was they could go to Allenbaugh House or they could go to Intermountain, and they could get a certain amount of days where they got detox safely, and then they were released back to the street with no follow-ups, no medications, no support groups, nothing. And so what it created was this failure in and out of the system. And it takes a lot to actually say, I want to try and recover, and then to have nowhere to safely fall. And failure just feeds that addiction. And so we created Project Recovery. We do direct intake from Allenbaugh, from Intermountain, from the street, and we bring them in. We give them 7 days of care, and we have a recovery coach and on-site programming through Recovery for Life, professional therapy, and it's an in-house rehabilitation clinic, basically. And it's changed the world for many, many of our guests because of that. And the final program that we developed was just this summer. With need, we had a church, True Hope Church, that bought us a food trailer because our building has no kitchen. Somehow we do 220 meals every night when we were just a single shelter, but we did that without a kitchen. We did that with a lot of partnership and donation and things like that. But when Corpus Christi shut down and the churches shut down, and there was still the need of people who were using our shelter and those who were unsheltered, we had to find a way to prepare meals, and we didn't have the bandwidth to do so many meals. So we decided to bring guests in who were interested in food service and create a food service training program, where as they're getting their skills to become employed in food service, they're actually making food and serving it to their friends in the homeless community. And that was launched in August of last summer, and it continues and has been very rewarding for our guests to have such a value. When you serve your friend food that you've prepared, it makes them feel very good. And so now I'm going to turn it over to my staff to share some of their work within the shelter. And the first person who will come up and speak with you is Miranda J. She's the director of case management for all of the work that we do.
Hi. I'm short. Hi, like Jody said, my name is Miranda. I am the Director of Case Management at Interfaith. I'd like to talk a little bit today about one of our more high-risk portions of our already vulnerable population. That's the medically fragile. I don't know if you guys have heard, but we're kind of in the middle of a housing crisis right now. And what's not so commonly talked about in those conversations is the impact that that is having on long-term care facilities, assisted living. Hello? Okay. The assisted living facilities, the places that our medically fragile guests need as acceptable options to be able to have a long-term housing solution. To kind of discuss and tell you about what's going on with this crisis, I'd like to share a story with you. It's one that's really near and dear to my heart right now. It's about a gentleman on 4th of July weekend. We were having a barbecue for our guests to celebrate the holiday. And my staff found this gentleman unknown to us before. He had not been in our system, in his wheelchair outside by the gate, very fragile, couldn't really talk that great, was very wheezy, no shirt on, in the heat, and just needing somewhere to go. So staff brought him in. He had a hospital bracelet on his wrist that had his name and his date of birth. That was about almost all the information that this guy could provide to us himself. He had no recollection of where he was or how he got there. It was evident that there was something going on with his brain or memory, something. Without the ability to have the answers right then, our staff just knew that he just needed to be cared for. So they got him some food, they got him some clothes to put on, they got him a safe space, and he got to rest for the night. So the next day we started diving in to try and find out who this guy was. Where did he come from? What's going on with him? How can we best serve him? And in doing so, our staff kind of had to play private investigators a little bit, and we're able to come across an article that told us that this man had a house in Weiser. And a couple months prior, the house had burned down with one person inside who died from the fire. And he was lucky enough to be drug out by a passerby. From there, we were able to find out the location of the hospital he was taken to. So we were able to start getting records about what had happened to him. He was taken to a hospital and was there for a couple weeks. He suffered severe smoke inhalation damage and was very weak. They got him back to health, as stable as they could, and realized they had nowhere for him to go. He has no family in the area. He had no friends, and come to find out that the only friends that he had were ones that were under the ruse of caring for him in that home, were exploiting him and taking advantage of him. So of course, none of them were around to help him now. And there was no options available for bed availability in these facilities, and the hospital could no longer deem it medically justified to keep him hospitalized. So he ended up over here in Boise into the shelter system. When he first arrived, he was taken to another shelter, but because of his needs, he was not qualified for services there, and that's how he ended up with us. And so how could we take care of him? He just needed a safe space at the moment. And we dove more into who he was and where he came from. We were able to find more little bits and pieces of people who could provide us collateral information. And we found out that in 1979, he suffered such a severe car accident where 3 other people died, and he had brain damage and had brain surgeries from that. And he has had those memory and cognitive impairments ever since. And this guy's life has just been one tragedy after another. And so now he's with us, and while we try to find placement for him, he deserves to be safe. Like, he needs somewhere to be. If that man were to be forced to go out those doors each day, he would not be able to find his way back to us. He doesn't know how to find his way to food. We bring it to him. He can't even remember what he ate for dinner last night, but he will tell us that he loves it when we bring him string cheese and Oreos, especially if there's chocolate milk with the Oreos. When I leave on Fridays and I come back Monday morning, most of the time he doesn't really remember who I am. But when we play classic rock songs on the radio, he sings along with them every word and claps along and is just so joyous. And when he can't find where he's going around the building, he needs to be taken and reminded where the bathroom is. We push him along and he lifts up his feet and he goes, vroom, 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 because he loves fast cars. And this man, he just touches my heart. And to think that there was nowhere else for him to be if we weren't taking care of him the way we are right now while we go through this process just scares me. This crisis is not getting better anytime soon. So we need to get better. And we need to be able to have the adequate space and safety for these guests that have such high needs. Thank you.
How's everybody doing? Is that better? Okay. How's everybody doing? My name's Thomas Bernier. I am the shelter director for the Red Lion Hotel Interfaith Sanctuary for the families and medically fragile. Jody is going to go pretty far in depth in our presentation about our services program. So I'll go ahead and save everybody some time. I'm not going to be redundant, but I do want to make a couple points on why I believe this shelter is important, why our shelter is unique, and why we need to expand our services. First off, I'll go ahead, ma'am. First off, I'll go ahead and, first off, right there, okay. First off, I'll go ahead and start with the families. We are the only shelter in town or in this community that services the whole family makeup. I know when we're thinking about the whole family makeup, we think of mothers, fathers with their children as a family unit, but I want us to take special focus on single fathers with children. We are currently the only shelter in this community that services single fathers with children. There's over 136 families on the wait list. So what does that mean? What that means to me is that there is multiple families that are calling every single day asking for services, and their demand for services far exceeds our capacity to serve. That means to me that there is multiple families every day in this city that are living in unsafe conditions, that there is multiple families every day in this city with their children that are sleeping in their cars. And that really bothers me. I'll just go ahead and speak about a couple stories that are very close to heart. First one would be a family came to us, father terminally ill with cancer. He only had 60 days to live. We was able to get him in, receive services. He got stabilized. Instead of living for 60 days, he's able to stay with us for 8 months. And before he left, he let us know that he was comforted and at ease for the fact that he knew that his family was going to be safe and that his family was going to be all right because they were with us and not living on the streets. There's another gentleman that I know of, heart failure, end of life. He was living in his truck and we got him in. He received services. We was able to outreach to his family. And we did the outreach to his family. His family was able to visit with him the last few days that he was with us, and he was able to die with dignity and respect. There's another man that I know of that has been homeless since 1992. This man came to us, heart failure. He received services. We got him into programming, got him on the housing list. We got him housed. His health condition greatly improved. Every time I see this man, because he rides a bike all around town now, every time I see him, he is so happy, and he tells me that the feeling is so surreal that he has been homeless or living in shelters since 1992, and now he's housed. What we do matters, what we do is important, and what we do has a positive effect on this community. I know that there's a conversation going on about what and how and where our shelter should look like. I'm not going to dig deep into that, but I am going to say that we need to expand our services, and we need to expand our services now. At the main shelter we used to run our operations at, per fire code, we were allotted 40 family beds and 10 cribs. Our current operations at the Red Lion Hotel, we far exceed that capacity. There's a lot of families that depend on us, and there's a lot of medically fragile that depend on us. And we have an expiration date on our funding. So the more that we kick this conversation down the road, is the less time that we're going to have to properly react, and we're going to possibly put a lot of families and a lot of medically fragile at risk. I worked for Interfaith Sanctuary for several years. I love this organization. I love the fact that we're not afraid to think outside the box when it comes to addressing the issues. I love the fact that we're not afraid to try to go to the root causes to address these issues. I'm very proud of my team and the work they do every day. I'm very proud of the other shelters and services, the work they do in this city thus far as a whole, as how we've been addressing the homelessness issue as a community. And I really feel that we are a prime example thus far is not only how we see homelessness as a community, but how we've been addressing it. And I really hope that we're able to attain the resources to meet the city's needs so we can continue to be that example. I love this city. I love this community. Thank you for your time.
Hi, can you hear, everybody hear me okay? Yeah,
make sure
there we
you
go. Make sure we're
close.
close. My name's Terrence Scher. I've been working with Interfaith Sanctuary off and on since 2010, 2011. I first started there in service learning at BSU and in the social work program. And I've always come back to volunteer and help out. And I was fortunate enough to have an opportunity to work there full time now, running their recovery programs. What we're dealing with chronic homelessness in the community with addiction. These people usually are co-occurring, meaning that they have some mental illness and severe addiction. We're dealing with the worst of the worst usually because they fell through the cracks. They've been through multiple treatments. They've been cookie cuttered, stamped through. They get a certificate and they're back on the street. Our program's a little different. We work really hard to deal with the worst of the worst, basically. But they're actually really wonderful people, and they just need an opportunity to be part of community. I got a story about Mr. Sam. Mr. Sam was a chronic years-long alcoholic. We found him out in the alley during the wintertime, sitting on a cardboard box with a poncho on, with a half gallon of vodka between his legs. He did this day after day after day and had severe mental illness. He would rock back and forth all day long. Fortunately, our awesome case management people, we see this and they brought him into the shelter. We started working with him and figuring out what we could do to help him. We got him a little stabilized and got him into the shelter, and then we got him into programming, our 3-phase program for recovery. He came in and his mental illness started to be addressed, and with his medications. And come to find out, this gentleman fell through the cracks for years and years because he is developmentally disabled. And he had a really traumatic event, witnessing a murder-suicide when he was younger. And it's affected him his whole life. And he still speaks about it today. As a matter of fact, he spoke to me about it today. But this gentleman went through the program. Phase 1 program, came into full-time treatment on our intensive inpatient, basically, treatment program. And he worked really hard, and he stayed really positive, and he got his mental health stabilized. He gets a monthly income because he's disabled, but we got him on a housing list and we got him housed. And what he is he's a part of community now. He's worked really hard and is a part of the community. He comes back to our shelter 3 times a week, like clockwork, and he comes and helps out other people in recovery. And we have a lot of people de-stress with him, and he's a testament to the work we do. And he's part of community. We're trying to do an assertive community treatment kind of thing with our program. Not only do we have people come through our program and they get a certificate, but they also move on and we help them in the community as well, stay connected. Interfaith Sanctuary, Project Recovery, Project Wellbeing, we work very close together, and we provide that foundation for folks to come back and help and be a part of community. We have a lot of people that already have housing and jobs, and we still continue to address their needs when they need it. They come back and ask us, so they don't fall through the cracks or lose their housing, or if they need other work or something like that, or anything they need, might need food, we'll give them a food box. So we really appreciate the community support that we get, that we work with our partners as well. Catch and Corpus Christi and all the other people that donate to us. But the most important thing is connection. These folks have not have connection. They've been falling through the cracks and they don't know where to go, what to do. And we provide an opportunity to do that and connect with them and have them a part of our community. And we have some really wonderful people right now that have been through our program. They're doing so very well in our community, and they keep giving back, and they're a perfect example of what our programs can do. Thank you.
Hello, is this good? Okay. Hi, I'm Nikki. I run Project Wellbeing at Interfaith Sanctuary. And Jody kind of talks about the program. So I'm going to talk about the stories and the people we help in these programs, because that's really why I'm here. And I know all of us are here for that reason, for the people that we get to help. I've been working at Project Wellbeing for 2 years now. I've been at the shelter for 3 years. And I think with everything that's been set up here, the biggest thing is connection. We have these people out on the street. We get them inside and we're able to actually connect with them. We can build those relationships. They feel like they have a place where they belong. It's safe. And that's really the beginning of their healing. And we've seen so many people that we've brought in be successful just by the connection and the safety. I have a guest who came to me, I would say last year. He came in, he was very withdrawn. You could just see in his eyes that he was lost and hopeless. And he said Interfaith Sanctuary was actually the last place that he had gone. And it was the place that helped him the most. But he came in, he was really quiet. He started programming. Like Jody said, I didn't ask anything of him. I just wanted him to be safe. I wanted him to know that we were there for him. He could come to us at any time when he felt comfortable, because you have to understand these people are coming off the street. The trust is not there. They're getting passed by, so they feel like they don't really have a place where they can trust and open up and really ask for the help that they need until they're in with us and they see that we're there for them. So he came in every day. He sat in class. He didn't participate much, but he would show up. He would show up every day. He was struggling with an addiction. And then in my group, we do a lot of like dream boards. I do this activity called I Am. And usually it's like positive affirmations. Everybody hands them in. It's like, I am brave, I am strong. This guest handed me his and it said, I am confused, I am sad, I'm emotionless, I am fearful. And he handed that to me. And of course it broke my heart. And I just told him, we're here for you. Whenever you're ready, we're here. Keep showing up, be inside, be safe. And he did, showed up. He started working around the shelter. Everybody started to get to know him. He's a likable, easygoing guy. And he came in one day, he sat down, and I do check-ins. And I said, how are you today? And he said, this has changed my life. I said, oh, you want to say more about that? You guys have changed my life. You guys call me by my name. No one has ever called me by my name in at least 2 years. Out on the street, nobody cares what your name is. He walks in, he says he walks in every morning and people are like, hey, Evan, how's it going? He says, I've never had that. And to me, I was like, oh my gosh, like who thinks of that? These people deserve to be acknowledged. They deserve to be called by their name. And I didn't even think about it because I've never had to deal with that. So he comes in, he tells me that. You see, he gets the light back in his eyes. And he keeps showing up. And You know, he says the shelter has changed his life. And actually I talked to him today and he said, just by you guys knowing my name, it changed my entire life. And now he is working full-time. He just got a raise. He's dependable. He has money in the bank. He has money in savings. He plans on moving out in December. And he's actually like one of the most positive guys I've ever been around. Like if you need any form of positivity, you go to him and he will provide it. So, oh, and he's also, let's see, 10 months clean and sober, and he's reconnected with his family, which is huge in my program. I've seen a lot of people who kind of disconnect from their family because they're in the middle of, you know, that fight or flight, just trying to figure out what they're doing next. They come inside and they're able to reconnect with people. So he's 10 months clean and sober. And I actually had him do an IM last week. And this is his new IM. I am safe, I'm inspired, I'm happy, I'm a hard worker, I'm trustworthy, I'm driven, and I'm grateful. So these are the people that we help, and this is why we do what we do. And if we had bigger space, we could help more people. Thank you.
Okay, while Jody's making her way back up to the podium, I just want to say two things. One, let's acknowledge how hard it is to present in a formal setting like this in such a vulnerable and passionate way. So maybe a round of applause for our presenters. Thank you. Appreciate you being here today. And then the second thing is all of you on your clipboards have those index cards. They should look familiar to you by this point. As Jody continues with the presentation about interfaith operations, if you have questions that are specific to how interfaith operates, please jot them down on those cards and we will collect them for you. Just raise your hand, we'll come around and grab them and we'll make sure those get answered either during the Q&A or later. Thanks.
And the questions can be for anyone, including the president of the board, myself, and my whole staff. So if you have questions about the programming, you guys did a phenomenal job, and I know that was scary, so thank you. And there's a couple of things that they said. When they talk about safety, it's not what you think. Safety means knowing where you can be and knowing that someone knows your name and that they care about you. It's not like there's danger all over this community. It's just that when you don't know where to go and you don't know how you're going to get there, that's a very unsafe feeling. And the other thing is when Terrence talks about the worst of the worst, he's talking about how sick they are, not that these are bad people. These are wonderful people who are so sick and they've not been receiving proper care. So I just wanted to make sure that we're passionate and we talk passionately about what we do, but it maybe sounds different to you guys. So I just wanted to clear that up. The other thing that I wanted to make abundantly clear is that every single guest who enters into our system is immediately connected with catch and coordinated entry. Our goal is to move people out of our shelter as soon as we possibly can and get them into the most appropriate housing for them. And so even though people are kind of stuck in the shelter for different reasons, it's not because we're not working as hard as we can with our partners to try and find that housing for them. So the minute they enter our system, we go with catch, they case conference with us, we get them on the list. And then as they're looking at what that list looks like, what the waiting is going to be, they are able to look at the vouchers and maybe tell us what's going to be needed. And then our case management team works to overcome the barriers for that time where their voucher comes up. And then together we work to get them into housing if it's available. One of the things that is very true in our community right now is housing is not available. And so together we advocate, we try and find kind of solutions outside the box. Is there a property manager that maybe is just has like a unit that they do as a hobby or whatever? Would they consider looking at one of our guests? And you got to look far and wide right now to try and get people out of homelessness into appropriate housing. And the other thing that we work on in conversation all the time at our Path Home when we meet with our partners is to advocate and to really try and move forward affordable housing ideas, It doesn't matter if it's different, the innovate, like we talk about it all the time because we know how important housing is. Shelter is not that's not where we want people to end up. But if they do end up in shelter right now, we want that experience to be the most safe, untraumatic, supported community as we work together to get them housing. Our housing numbers, just so that you guys have an idea about how many people we move out of our shelter. In 2019, we got 26 families into permanent housing and 30 single men and women. In 2020, we got 16 families with children and 22 single men and women out in that year. And we did work intensively with Catch. Once we had moved the families with children and the medically fragile into the hotel, they worked in collaboration with us to do what's called rapid rehousing to try and identify those groups to get into housing. And so we had some good success early, and then it's been challenging ever since because, as you know, we're in a crisis right now. Currently in 2021, we have gotten 9 of our families into housing and 31 single men and women into all different types of housing. So I need to catch you up on who we are right now and why. We are the partner with City of Boise to respond to the pandemic. And so because of that, we became more than one building. We currently operate our emergency shelter for single men and women only. We can take care of 140 guests there every night. Some of those guests are sleeping on the floor because we continue to keep safe protocol. And so we have to space, we can't use every bed. And we are able to offer daytime programming to the guests who are in programming, but we don't have space to serve 140 people inside our shelter during the day. And so anyone who's not in programming or employed, those guests work with Corpus Christi, that's the daytime hospitality, or currently they're able to hang out on the backside of our property for shade, water, meals, and things like that to temporarily help because Corpus Christi is not big enough anymore to serve all the need. So our second location, Thomas spoke with you about, is the hotel where we house our families with children and our medically fragile. Currently, we are able to put about 100 bodies into that hotel in different family formations and medically fragile. And that operates 24/7. Those guests they can occupy their room all day long, all night long. They're allowed to enter and exit the hotel, but there are some shelter rules in place as far as curfews, but they have a safe place to be all the time. We're able to bring in home health and hospice because the rooms are private. HIPAA won't allow us to do those kind of services in an open dorm, which is why this program has never existed with Interfaith Sanctuary before, because we didn't have the ability to do it. So when you hear about the father who received hospice and the gentleman who was living in his car and the people who've gotten better and gotten housed, it's because we brought consistent health care to them and we were able to keep track of their needs because there's a private room to deliver those services. And then the second hotel is the COVID hotel. That number fluctuates depending on where we're at in the pandemic. We're planning for an anticipated surge, so we're about to lease another floor at the hotel that we'd have 42 additional rooms should the pandemic variant kind of wipe us out again. I'm being optimistic and hoping not, but just in case, we have to be ready to serve that crisis. And finally, we ran the warming cooling shelter, which was first located at Hayes Auditorium at the downtown library, and then it was moved to Foothills Arts and Science. This day shelter was created because the day shelter in our area, Corpus Christi, had to shut down. They couldn't run because of many factors. Churches were not able to serve inside their buildings. There was no place for the new homeless and the homeless that were being served by Boise Rescue Mission, Interfaith Sanctuary, and Corpus Christi. So we created this day shelter in this huge building where we were able to bring support groups, computers. Catch came and did case conferencing with sheltered and unsheltered. We had meals, we had a donation room. It was fantastic. And we did our COVID testing, our vaccinations there. And It's no longer running. The building, we only had it for a certain amount of time, and then it went back to the owner. And so currently what you see is a day shelter, Corpus back open at half capacity, the backside of our shelter. And then those who are unsheltered, it's a little bit more visible now because that building's gone. But that was a daytime only building. And then the people that we served would either go back to Interfaith, back to the Boise Rescue Mission, or they may be unsheltered and they're living in cars or on the river, but it didn't matter to us. We served whoever was in need because of the pandemic. Why this is not sustainable for us, operating these 4 different types of services. Basically, it took our staffing from 20 to 42 staff. Logistically, we have to run everything to all the different locations. Our main hub is where our facility director is. Our transportation is based at our main hub, but the needs are all over, and we deliver these needs to anyone. So if you're at the hotel and you need to go to the doctor, we're taking you to the doctor. If you're at the emergency shelter and so it's just spreading us very thin, and we're not thriving, but we're doing the best we can. It increased our costs. Our budget this year should have been $1 million, and it was $1.8 million. And that's a lot of fundraising. And that's even with FEMA funding, ESG funding, support from donors. It's putting a lot of pressure on us, and it's too stressful for our organization. As each of my staff members has explained, we work as a community, we support each other. The community supports each other, and being in all these different places has put a lot of strain on our ability to sit and make sure our staff is okay, check on their well-being. We don't see them for a week at a time because they're at different locations. You have to keep an eye on your staff when they're working this hard, and you have to keep an eye on your operations. And it's not our business model. So why this new location for us? It's so that we can do better shelter in a bigger space. What we need is more space to serve families with children. We need to go from 40 beds in our current building to be able to serve 94 is the goal for this new building, plus cribs for babies. We need to be able to continue to serve our medically fragile. Once we lose the hotel, our dorm shelter will not allow us to have that programming. It will disappear. We need to offer 24/7 access to our building in a low barrier way. So anyone who stays in this new shelter will have a place to be day and night. If they choose to leave and come back, they're able. We can't do that at our old building. We need a commercial kitchen because you need a commercial kitchen to do the work we do. We need permanent programming sites so that our preschool has a cubby hole and their name on it, and it doesn't turn into a dining room at night. And Project Wellbeing and Project Recovery know where they're going. And we need to have our partners with us. We need, Catch has an office there. FMRI and Terry Riley Health Services are going to have a medical clinic with us so that they're able to serve our guests as they need it. And we can keep those healthcare costs managed and not use the emergency medical system, because we're keeping eyes on the people who need help right now. And we need it to be safe, secure. It needs to have green spaces because we have babies and we have seniors and we have families and we have neighbors, and they deserve to have a place to rest. That's beautiful. Kids deserve a playground. We want to have a community garden, and we want our community to be part of that, not just our homeless. And the location needs to offer access to transportation to allow our guests to take care of some of their own daily needs. We need a bike-friendly way to get to places, a green belt, something like that, and employment opportunities. So we're not relying on a transportation system that's not quite there yet, that maybe they can just walk to work because this location creates more access. And I think the biggest thing for us is we want the ability to continue and do better and serve our guests with the dignity and grace that they deserve. This is just to show you, this map is basically right now we serve 240 guests. We do 140 at our current building that is sold, and we do 100 at the hotel. So that gives us the ability to serve 240 people. When we originally looked at creating this new shelter, we actually could have served 307 in the building that was being looked at, We thought that that was too big, so we wanted to go to 250, but based on neighborhood input, we reduced that number to 200. And that's where it sits right now, is that we can serve 200 guests. What that means is we will have 94 beds for families, 22 beds for medically fragile, 60 beds for single. We're eliminating some of the bunk beds because bunk beds are uncomfortable, quite honestly, and some people can't get on the second bunk and they deserve a single bed on the ground. And then we have 24 beds that are for emergency intake, but it leaves 40 people out. So when we get to this new location, there's still going to be 40 people that we're going to not know where to put, but at least we've grown to 200. And based on site selection and all of that, that's how we look at these numbers. The on-site programs, Catch, Terry Riley, Family Medicine, Residency of Idaho, Recovery for Life is the direct counseling that we get for our recovery program. We'll have Project Recovery, Project Wellbeing, the Family Daytime Program. And I'm going to shorten this because I want you guys to have time. So I'm going to lose those slides, Aaron, and just go right to questions and answers now. And thank you so much for allowing me to present.
Thank you, Jody. So only one card came in. Other folks may still be processing. I think we had an answer to it. Do you feel like it was answered? Okay, great. It was about the difference in cost between a single site versus multi-site. And Jody shared some of those numbers, those budget numbers. So why don't we just open it up to live Q&A? Do you have questions for Jody about Interfaith shelter operations? I know many of you have been clamoring for weeks to have this opportunity. So please make sure you introduce yourself before you ask your question. Thanks.
Hi, Hillary Takahashi, Collister. So is a two-part question. So first part, what percentage, if you have it, of IFS guests access your services currently offered? And then do you have a breakdown of a specific percentage for each service?
It was very hard to understand.
No, it's okay. We got masks and everything, you know. Okay, so what percentage of IFS guests access the services offered in the programming that you stated? And do you have a breakdown for a percentage for each specific service?
So unfortunately, what we have is wait lists. We used to serve about 16 guests within the recovery program and the well-being program. I think we have it at, what's our numbers right now? So we can do 12 people in programming, and that's because of the pandemic. So it's limited. So until someone moves out of the program, then we can move someone in off the waiting list. So the waiting lists are about 50 deep every day of the week, because people are able to kind of see, they like the idea first and foremost of being able to stay inside the building, but then after that, they get to participate in the programming. So we'd like to do more, but we're 12 people at a time right now. And
I'd also like to say that.
Oh, we got to get you a mic. Sorry, just so folks online can hear.
So here's a mic for you guys. You can just split it 4 ways. Yeah.
I know for our recovery program, currently in the last year since our recovery program's been in operation in the year and a half, we've had 53 people come through our program. We've had about 15 of them continue to be successful. We have people that fall through the cracks and then they keep coming back, but we keep providing those services for them and hopefully until they can get it. So that's just with the recovery program. You got numbers, your numbers?
I have like numbers. So I usually have 12 at a time in my program. I think since Project Wellbeing started, probably had close to 60 people in the program. I don't have numbers on who's out and housed and all that right with me, but you know, yeah, we can provide that. Yeah. Yeah.
So then how would your potential new facility help you expand or support these types of services even more than you currently are?
The new space that we have, currently we hold our recovery programming in a utility trailer. The utility trailer comfortably can fit maybe 12, 14 people. So that's basically the size of our program right now. With a bigger space, we'd be able to have more people access recovery programming. And we'd be able to have the staff and everything in the new space to be able to handle that and be able to move them on and hopefully get them in intensive case management and get mental illness taken care of and stuff like that. Right now, we're kind of limited in our space.
Okay, Hillary, we'll return to you if nobody else has a question, but I just want to make sure other folks have a chance. It looks like Andrew.
You mentioned my name's Andrew. You mentioned the day shelter for warming and cooling in the new facility. Would you be having day shelter, or is that going to flip back to Corpus Christi?
I skipped that slide. That was a really important slide. So what we learned during this year is that Corpus Christi will not ever be big enough to serve the need anymore. And so what our hope is that by moving and creating a day shelter of our own in our building, for any guests who stayed with us the night before, we are the day shelter. We will have a day shelter center, libraries, access to groups, case management, everything that we learned to do in the warming shelter is being built into this new shelter, along with a mail room so that our guests can actually have an address. Corpus Christi right now serves as the address for anyone who's unsheltered or staying at our shelter. They actually take the mail for everyone. So we're building that into our programming so that Corpus can stay where they are and maintain the ability to serve those who are sheltered with the other shelters and those who are unsheltered. And then we're going to provide the shelter services during the day to our guests.
Okay, we have another question in the room, and then I have a few from the chat.
Part of my question was answered.
Sorry, can you introduce yourselves?
Oh
for
yeah,
folks
I'm
online?
Annie McCutcheon. I'm one of the neighborhood leaders. So my question was, I know we're not talking about specific location today, but there has been a lot of talk about fear surrounding what will happen with the population or wherever the shelter is located to the neighborhood surrounding. What will be the implications for neighborhood members? And I guess I'm trying to eloquently say there's a lot of fear about where the shelter will be located and the impacts for the neighborhood. And I'm wondering what has been your experience so far with your location now, and what are you doing to kind of mitigate that wherever the location ends up being? I heard some of the talk about daytime programs, and so part of that sounded like it was answered, but.
Yeah, and I think that the task force has done a good job about explaining what the housing first approach looks like in a shelter. And even though some of the programming that we have is housing first in our existing shelter, because of the small size, we can't truly offer housing first until we get into a building that's big enough to support anyone who stays with us. So the key to this kind of shelter is the 24/7 access with the day center. When people have no place to go during the day, you see the issues with loitering and survival crimes and the visibility of the homeless. And in fairness to them, they have no place to be. And so Corpus Christi provides one place for them to be, but there's not space for everyone who is in need. The library is not open. You know, there's mitigating circumstances during the pandemic, but they're real all the time for people who don't have houses. The way that you program a shelter, it's being asked of all shelters, quite honestly, is to make sure that your guest has someplace to be all day long. And what that does is it reduces trauma. It creates a place for them to get their meals and to not have to worry about where their next meal is coming from. Desperation and trauma is what causes those survival crimes. This shelter is protecting the neighborhood, the guests and the staff from that happening. It is the safe space to be. And so it's different than, you know, what you see on Americana is a mix of all different kinds of unhoused people. Some of them literally are utilizing the shelter system, but those shelter systems don't support daytime help. And so they have to go to Corpus Christi. and there's not enough room. Do you see what I mean? And so our goal is to have enough room for anyone who comes and is a guest of ours. It won't be open to general population, only to the guests who are staying at our shelter. Does that answer the question?
Okay, Jody, maybe you could just stay right there because I have a couple questions from the chat. I will say, I'm just going to read this one, but I think it got answered already. So if the person who asked it wants to ask something more specific, please do that. But the question is, what other services is Interfaith Sanctuary currently using at its locations, such as medical, mental health, and other service calls? And I think you addressed that the hotel is allowing you to do some medical care, and you do have
Yeah.
a mental health program and things. So
When we have a guest who requires home health, hospice, anything like that, we move them to the hotel. If we have some of our guests are chronically ill, but they don't have those attachments yet, they have to be ordered by a hospital. So when and if we can get that kind of high level care, we do move them to the hotel. That's the only way that they can actually get that care. So
a related question might be, so God forbid the pandemic stretches on for a while, what will your COVID related services be like at the new location? Have you thought through that yet?
well, God forbid, my guess is that, there would continue to be funding to support a growing need. And so our shelter, that wherever it is, that new shelter will take on part of that, like we did this time. With our emergency shelter, we're able to serve 140 guests during a pandemic. And then we moved 100 guests over to the hotel. Depending on what this new shelter is able to support, my guess is that we would have to do a second shelter as well, because it creates more need. And, that's where partnership and emergency funding come in. And we just stretch again.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question in the room, and then we're going to go to one more from the chat.
And it kind of goes along with what you were
All right,
just
can you
talking about.
introduce yourself?
Sure, it's
Thank you.
Jennifer Godoy. I'm one of the neighborhood leaders. It sounds like you're going to operate below your operational capacity for this new shelter in response to what the neighborhood is saying. Do you hope that will grow either in conjunction with neighborhood positivity, or are you going to put that operational capacity back into different programs or additional programs?
That's a great question, and one that kind of sits out there because of this newly formed task force. I think we understood the need to be at about 240 people when we were developing this program. What we wanted to do was find a way to listen to the neighborhood and create something more comfortable. So that number 200 was put out there. It didn't really change the comfort level. And so I think we just have to see what happens at the end of this task force, determine where that site's going to be. And for now, the way that the architect has drawn this current building, it has beds for 200. And we won't be able to serve everyone in need, but we'll be doing a good job of serving 200.
Okay, I have a question from Elaine Clegg, who's a member of the task force, who's online today. The question is, so this may need a little explanation, Jody, in terms of context. What impact would it have if recovery were offered at the Allenbaugh site in a different building with individual units?
And Jen, this is Elaine. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, just a little explanation. Boise City Ada County Housing owns the rest of the Allenbaugh site and is looking to build a recovery facility there that would include units and housing during the recovery period. I just wondered how that would impact your ability to serve other populations if you didn't need to serve that population at your new shelter.
I would think it would actually just take care of the need that we're not able to serve. It won't remove the need. We only take care of a certain amount based on what we can do, but it will certainly improve access. It won't remove the need to have as many beds and programs as possible for the people who haven't been served for years. So I think it's not one, I don't think it's one solution. I think it's partnership and us all being able to add programming and then maybe one day, but I think you have to look at it all. I don't think you can remove one and think that the other is going to be able to take it all on. But I'm happy to hear that that's an option. That's exciting.
Thank you, Jody. And I wasn't suggesting it allows you to remove the need. I was just wondering if you all had talked about what if that need were being served, or at least mostly served somewhere else, what that would that allow you to do that you're not thinking about doing now? Maybe it's just more beds for the folks that otherwise you wouldn't be able to serve, but that was the gist of my question.
Yeah, I think that the beauty of our shelters, we're super adaptable. So if we find out that there's less need in one category, we'll grow the need for where it is. So if like suddenly recovery didn't need to have beds in our shelter, we'll add more for medically fragile. We'll add more for families with children. We're just here to take care of as many people as possible. And right now, the way that this shelter is defined is based on the need at hand. So we're fluid. If we find out that there's less need someplace, we'll add more capacity for somebody else.
I want to make sure that I've given everybody in the room a chance to ask any remaining questions. We probably have time for one more. Any other outstanding for Jody before we finish up today? Okay, I have a few announcements for you.
Thank you so much. And we do have a little going away gift. I'm not sure if those have been distributed yet, but thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Jody. Thanks to all of you again for sort of sitting and paying such close attention. I know this lecture style is difficult, but appreciate you being here today. Just a quick preview of the topic for next week. So those of you who are neighborhood leaders, you know there's going to be a workshop for you this Wednesday evening to give you a chance to talk with us. I'll be facilitating that with some colleagues from the city, talk with us about your concerns and how best to present them to the task force next week. We'll also hear from a brokerage firm and Maureen Brewer from here at the city on their land scan. So they've been analyzing the list of potential sites that they have collected and that you have suggested. So getting into the nitty-gritty of siting next week. As usual, I will be sending out a summary of today's meeting to all of you as quickly as I possibly can. And we'll also share homework for our next meeting shortly. All of you have the FAQ from the feasibility criteria questions that you posed. So please make sure to give those a once over. And if you're interested, we'll be hosting another 30-minute workshop after today's meeting about those criteria if you have more information. Quick announcement for everybody in the room and online. Some of folks have been emailing the entire task force with their concerns and their questions. I love the public input. I encourage that, but I might ask that you send those to me specifically, and then I can get them to the right people, including whether or not that makes sense to compile those and share them with the task force. So I'm just trying to keep the task force members' emails from absolutely exploding into a ball of fire. So again, I'm not trying to limit public input, but if you would email me with your questions, concerns, or feedback, I'll make sure they get to the right people. Thank you so much. Courtney, anything before we end? Thank you, everybody. Please stay safe out there.